Alrighty, so we're just at about start time here, so I will kind of get us kicked off. First of all, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This is our fifth program in the Student Org Essentials series so far, and my name is Brooke Olson. I work in student activities, and I specifically support student orgs. And so within the scope of my role includes programs like this. And so now that we're in July and we're kind of moving through the summer, we're really starting to prepare for the fall. And we're probably in that brain space of like, okay, so we're getting through here. We need to start thinking about what's happening in the fall. And that's really exactly what this series is all about this summer. We're looking ahead to the fall and thinking about how we can take the innovation and the quick thinking that we had to do in the spring and the summer and continue to refine that and create goals as we prepare for the fall. So far we've covered topics of navigating uncertainty, service, social media use, programs, and those are actually posted to the programming page of our website in their recorded form. So you can go check them out after today at go.osu.edu/StudentOrgPrograms, and I'll pop that in the chat in just a couple of minutes. And today's topic boils down to belonging, more or less. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right above the physiological needs and safety, which is what a lot of us have been focusing on kind of initially, is the need to belong. And that's kind of that next core item. It's truly, a fundamental need for humans. And at the heart of student organizations on our campus is more or less the concept of fostering belonging. And a great contributor to making that belonging happen is in how we gather and how we create space and connections. So that's what we're thinking about today, which is the concept of bringing people together in our virtual environment. And here to chat with us about this is Anna Wagner. She's a dear colleague of mine in student activities, and Anna is uniquely poised to talk with us today because she once had the role that I now serve in, working with the student org community. So she knows a thing or two about student orgs, and she stayed with us in student activities and is now serving as a senior coordinator for leadership development. So she's here to share her brain with us today, and I'm very thankful to have her. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away, Anna.
Awesome. Everyone should experience at some point Brooke Olson introducing them because it will just give you a really nice ego boost. Hi, everyone. As Brooke mentioned, my name is Anna Wagner, and I serve as the Senior Coordinator for Student Leadership Development on the Student Activities team, and previously did work with the Student Org community on the Student Activities team at Ohio State Columbus campus. So very excited to be with you all today. My pronouns are she, her, and hers as well. So we're going to chat a little bit about digital meetings today, which I'm sure that everyone is both feeling, if you are anything like me, inundated with digital content, and also like we can't just quite put our finger on how to do it exactly right. So what we're going to do today is a fun little mashup of various things that I have been learning and experiencing, but then also really highlighting y'all's experiences and your feelings about the fall. So before we jump into any content, it would be helpful for me to get a feeling for who is in our meeting today. So I'm going to launch a poll about what role you hold with your student organization or various student organizations. So if you all could take a second to fill that poll out, that would be awesome. Okay. So looking like we've got a nice little divide between presidents and then faculty and staff advisors. So two very important entities in the success of a student organization, and I'm sure have a direct vested interest in how the heck are we going to do this thing that we've been doing for a really long time in our weird hybrid / virtual world. So thank you all for popping that in. What would be helpful for me, in addition to knowing who you are, is why you are here. So if you would take a second to just drop a couple words in the chat about why this session, why is this something that you were interested or excited to talk about? And just as a disclaimer, we're going to be using drop in the chat and polls a lot today. So just get real excited to be doing that throughout our conversation. So why are you all here today? Awesome. So Amy said to serve students better. A new staff advisor and want to learn as much as you can. Yes, I get that. Input is one of my top strengths in Strengths Quest, so I'm all about soaking up info wherever possible. Yeah, getting people oriented to the new normal and getting them engaged and connected. People don't like Zoom meetings, so how to make them fun and interesting. That is relatable. Hopefully we'll have at least a couple tips and tricks here that are useful. Overcoming Zoom fatigue or finding antidotes to it. Okay, awesome. So really a nice range here. I'm hopeful that we can accomplish some of these goals, but I also want to just be transparent that just like you all, I'm figuring it out as we go too, and really want to value y'all's expertise as well. Okay, so I do want to offer up a land acknowledgement for today's conversation. I know that we are all technically on different land right now, but the land where my computer is resting, and so the land that I am working from, I want to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on today has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, specifically the Shawnee, Miami, and Delaware nations. And I honor and respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this territory on which we gather. So try to always start any session with a land acknowledgement for a variety of reasons, primarily to recognize that Indigenous peoples were traditional stewards of this land who have a lasting relationship. They are still here occupying this land. We often talk about colonialism as something that happened in past tense, and it is still actively going on. And so we want to make sure that we are consistently remembering whose land we are on, because it is not ours. But that is the work that we're doing. If you want to learn more about this land acknowledgement was drafted by Melissa Beard-Jacobs and the staff in the Multicultural Center in Ohio State Columbus. So you can find out more there with that little URL at the bottom, or just Google Ohio State Land Acknowledgement and you'll get even more details. So our plan for today's session. So we're going to do a quick introduction. We're going to set some norms for today's conversation, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a temperature check of where people are at and how they are feeling. We are going to do some practice virtual team building. So I'm going to actually have you all do some of the activities that we are going to talk about. So get excited. If you didn't think you were going to have to do things, you're going to have to do things today. And then we're going to talk about some tips and tricks, things that I've been acquiring. We're going to do some more practice, and then I'll end with a group brainstorm on what has and hasn't worked so far, because we are all 4 or 5 months into this virtual world, and y'all have been in plenty of things to know things that are working and know things that aren't working. So that is the game plan. Before we jump into that content, I have another poll for you all. And this one, I just want you to be honest with me. How much were you planning to be actively engaged in today's discussion? Did you think that this was going to be a sit back and hear a content expert chat? Do you think there was maybe going to be a breakout group, or you thought you were going to be participating and engaging the entire session? Just so I know where you all are coming from. Okay. So, hey y'all. Sorry to burst some bubbles. We are gonna chat together. I'm gonna ask you to engage a lot. You're gonna be spending almost as much time in breakout groups as you are in this large group format. And that is intentional, because when we're thinking about how we are fostering belonging and making meetings engaging, sitting there with a screen share and one person talking over a PowerPoint is not the way to engagement. So we're going to do some of those things. I am sorry if you are someone who was not excited about that format. This is your forewarning to brace yourself about some really collective engagement. I also appreciate our 3 people who just said I genuinely had no idea, because I think that would have been me if I was answering my own poll question here. Okay. So Wanted to just share a little bit about myself and ground who I am here today. I try to do this with any presentation that I do because I think it's a lot easier for us to find moments of connection if we talk about not only the professional but the personal. So just some photos here that represent things that are important to me. Yoga and cooking are the two things that I do that aren't work that are most salient. So got some photos there highlighting that. A photo up at the top of myself and my partner at Pride last year. So that is a really important relationship in my life. And then some photos representing the work that I am fortunate enough to do at Ohio State. So this is a photo from last year's Student Life Leadership Awards. And then also we've got an Ohio voting sticker because I get to also work with our civic engagement groups on campus. So if you want to talk more about civic engagement, also happy to chat about that. And then a photo on the right here representing the 3 states that I have called home over the course of my life. So Oregon, Georgia, and Ohio have all been home to me. This is a picture that is up in my desk at my office that I have not seen in months, and I sorely miss it. So I love having it here. And I share this to talk about how we can use images to quickly capture who we are and offer just those moments of connection. Most of these are screen grabs from my Instagram, which is why they are squares, so I am sorry for that. But knowing how can we use still our digital space and share those connection points as well. So we talked a little bit about my professional background, wanted to give you a little bit about who I was personally as well as we go into this conversation. Oh, and then I'm a big theater nerd. That's why Hamilton is up there. I've only watched Hamilton once so far, but I've consumed so many articles about it. We could go off for a while. Okay, so some norms for today's session. I want you all to talk as least as much as I do, and that may be in your small group session, so not necessarily as we're all back together as a large group you're gonna be talking as much, but I want your voice to be just as important as mine is in this conversation. Please have your camera on or off as you see fit. I currently have my self view turned off, which we'll talk about that in a little bit because I find it really distracting to watch myself as I am presenting because I have some weird mannerisms that I've learned in the last 4 months. So please do what feels right for you all. I also recognize that not everyone likes to have a window into their house, and that is what we've been working through. So feel free to do as you see fit. As I've mentioned, we're gonna be doing a lot of activities and I will be dropping in and out of our screen share so we can see each other, particularly in some of our larger group discussions at the end. So just so you're aware of that as well. Want to just name that using the chat or unmuting to participate in discussion are both equally valid ways of response. People process in different ways. I've noticed in some of my meetings that there's just 2 completely different dialogues happening, one in the chat and one out loud. And I think that is a really unique element to our digital world right now. So feel free to take advantage of those things. When you go to the breakout rooms, please stay engaged with each other and please come back from the breakout rooms. We're gonna send you there and I want you to keep coming back because that is how we keep engaging. But then also just gonna trust you to be engaged with each other in those breakout spaces as well. And then ultimately, you know your organization or the student populations that you work with the best. So I'm going to provide some things that I have been learning. And if it doesn't feel like it's salient for your experience with your organizations, that is okay too. We make a lot of jokes in my household about Harry Potter with the sorting hat of you ultimately get to choose your own house. Like that's going to be the reference that I make here, that you are in charge of the journey you take. But I hope that some of this is relevant for you. Is there anything else that people need to understand on how we'll be engaging today? Either very technical, like our cameras are off, or really high level. If so, feel free to drop that in the chat. Okay, so just want to do a temperature check of where people are at. So this is our last poll. What is your student organization or the student organizations that you're working with? How are you planning to meet this fall? So are you already actively working on plans for virtual meetings? Are you still thinking about doing a mixture of in-person and socially distant? Have you not thought about it yet? Or again, do you just genuinely have no idea? Okay, so we've got a range here, y'all. And I think that that is valid. That's a lot of where our team is at right now too, is we're trying to shift our things for fall, considering what some in-person, some socially distant mixture might look like. And also, and I've said this several times to Brooke and to Jen, who's on this call as well recently, I feel like I've done a little bit of treading water this summer, waiting for decisions to become a little bit more clear. And really in the last week or so was like, oh no, August is coming. I have to stop treading and start planning. So that is where I am at in entering this conversation as well. Okay. Yes, thank you, Brooke. August is coming. So as we're thinking about how we want to do virtual meetings, socially distant meetings, I feel like are their whole own bowl of fun things that we are still figuring out. And in part, we're waiting for further guidance from Governor DeWine. So that is another piece there. But if we're thinking about those virtual meetings, I wanted to provide you all with some tools and tricks of how to do some of those team building things that we are used to doing really easily and effortlessly in person, how we might do that virtually other than just, here's a fun fact question, go around the room and talk about it. So we are going to practice those team building activities. So we're gonna do 2 of those activities right now. Both of them I'll be sending you to breakout rooms for, but I wanna explain it first. So the first one, we're gonna do a little bit of an identity building, team building activity. So I'm going to send you to a breakout room. You're gonna have 5 minutes to introduce yourselves to the people in your breakout room. And then I need you to decide on a team name and a mascot for your breakout room. And I want that team name and mascot to be intentionally connected to your team in some way. Your mascot cannot be Brutus Buckeye. We're gonna eliminate that right now. But think about some team name and mascot that you feel like represents your squad. It can be very silly, it can be very deep, it is up to you all. But I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to do that. I also want you, while you're in those breakout rooms, to decide who is going to be the person who's going to share out your team name and mascot when we come back together as a group. Any questions about what we'll be doing in the breakout space? Okay, fantastic. Well, then I am gonna go ahead and launch these rooms and bring y'all back in just a bit. Okay. Welcome back, y'all. So I hope we didn't cut off any conversations mid-word. That's always the toughest thing about the breakout rooms closing. But I would love to hear a report out on our team names and mascots. So can someone from breakout room 1, that was Amber, Annie, Judy, Raquel, and Ryan, whoever your elected speaker was, share with us?
Yep, that was us. So our team name is Engineering and Business, just because that's primarily from the area that we all came from. And then our team mascot is a giraffe.
A giraffe. Why'd you pick a giraffe?
We're all like, or someone mentioned we should say our favorite animal. And then so one of us like, oh, a giraffe. And then the other one was saying that she was also going to say giraffe. So we just went with it.
I love it. So a moment of commonality and connection.
Yes.
Sweet. How about breakout room 2? Elizabeth, Jason, Penny, and Sly.
Jason, do you want to talk? Or will I? Or someone else?
I'm happy to say that Elizabeth Parker, having joined the Worcester campus from Australia, was very happy, Anna, that you gave what in Australia is called a welcome to country. I had only heard it in Canada, except I heard it at OSU's Center for Diversity and Inclusion. We like that idea so much that we're developing one appropriate for the original inhabitants of the Worcester area, and that's our name, Welcome to Country.
Oh, I love that. We're glad to hear it. And also, Elizabeth, I thought I caught the accent and it was great to hear it out loud. What mascot did y'all land on, or did you just really stick with the name?
Well, we had, unless somebody else in the group would like to say something, a deer, because it was originally under consideration to be an OSU mascot.
Yeah, but a live buck deer on the field caused some challenges. So here we are. Awesome, thank you all. Okay, and then breakout room 3.
Hi, I'm Allison from Breakout Room 3, and I was with Camila and Kidron, and we decided to call ourselves the Political Science Mice. We were looking for commonalities between all of us, and we all like some political TV shows like House of Cards, West Wing, stuff like that, and we all have connections to science in some way. And we chose mice because of the political parties. Elephants are supposedly afraid of mice, and donkeys often live in barns with mice. And I didn't mention this in the group, but I thought about it later, that mice are often used in scientific experiments. So, yeah.
Wow, I love it. I love the multiple levels of thought on that mascot there. So thank you all. So thanks for engaging in a short, quick, like silly little team builder. I like this activity because it has you all discuss what commonalities are within the group without doing the and give a fun fact about yourself. Searching for commonalities is a way to get people to share many things. And so hopefully this can be something that you all might be able to adapt, especially in some of those earlier get to know you sort of meetings and sessions. So thanks for engaging there. So we're gonna do a second one of these team builder activities that works in a virtual setting. This time I'm gonna send you back to your same team so you get to chat with them just a little bit more.
Sorry, Anna, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, Denise?
Group 4 hasn't done it yet.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yes, you absolutely should have interrupted me. Share out Group 4.
So I just have to say that my cohorts in group 4 basically called my name out as we were leaving to come back to this discussion. So it was not democratically.
You were voluntold is what I would call it.
Voluntold, yeah. So, but I'm happy to do it. Anyway, we learned that each of us represent a different campus and came up with the great idea of connecting corners as our team name, and then using a puzzle piece as our mascot, because by working together, you know, we complete, you know, Ohio State University, but also that we're also communicating and collaborating and sharing information.
Oh, thank you for making sure you shared your lovely team name and mascot with us. And again, I apologize. That's awesome.
Thank you.
There's not a group 5 that I completely forgot either, is there? No, just group 4. Cool. Okay, so I am going to send you back to this room, and your task now is in your team. I need you to identify a place that you all collectively, not necessarily as a team, but you all can agree on it, want to go travel once travel is a thing we can do again. So no budget on this. It's all being funded by some miraculous thing, but find a place that you all want to travel. And then if you run through that really fast and you make a decision, your added task in your 5 minutes in your breakout group is to find something in the space where you're currently calling in from that you would bring on the trip. But the number one task is to identify a place you want to travel. And then secondary task, if you have time, what's something you would want to bring on the trip. So again, I'm going to give you 5 minutes in your breakout rooms and then bring you back together. You are not going to have to report out, so you don't have to volunteer anyone on this one. We're going to use this in a second. Okay, welcome back, y'all. So hold on to that vacation location that you decided on, because we're going to use it for another activity in a second. But again, this is one that hopefully you were able to talk through some connections, share some things that you all enjoy doing, talk about your life outside of work or outside of school. So that is the purpose of doing something like this. And then the find something in your space scavenger hunt activity, I feel like is a nice way to get people to still get up and move and share things if they want to. I don't know if anyone's able to make it to that part of it, but if you ever want to try that out, that's definitely a fun thing to do with people as well. Okay, so I'm not going to make you do another activity just yet. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks because I promised you that we would do that too. So these are, and again, these are things that I've just been gathering. I feel like I've spent the last couple of months just consuming every article and podcast and webinar I possibly can about how to do this virtual thing. And hopefully some of these have stuck and are relevant for you all. So some things about HighLevel, how we're doing virtual meetings effectively. You are gonna have to plan ahead more than you may normally. I am someone who loves to wing it. Like I will jot down 4 points and I know that this is gonna be the thing we're talking about. You do have to have a plan for your virtual time. And so plan ahead knowing that you will need to make that plan a little bit more robust than you may normally be accounting for. And this is something that came up in a session that I was in about how we're doing equity and inclusion work in a virtual setting. Norms for how we're gathering are even more important in a virtual world. So if you notice some of the norms we had earlier, some of them were very tasky, like have your camera on or off. Some of them were far more theoretical, like the level of engagement that we're asking for from you all. We lose a lot of the nonverbal cues that we are used to relying on in our human connection via virtual engagement. So be really explicit about how you're hoping that people will be engaging together. If you all want to do this with your exec board at the beginning of the year, if you need to do this at every meeting that you're hosting, whatever that looks like, but please do not skip the norms for your conversations. And don't be afraid of both really high level and really low level norms. Use a variety of engagement tools. So polls, Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, all really good resources to get people's thoughts up and engaged in the conversation. Videos in screen share can be a little laggy, but you definitely can still do that as a way to share with people. Please make sure that you do share your computer sound if you are ever trying to screen share a video, or if you want to even just have music playing in the background, make sure to share your computer sound. And then using breakout rooms heavily and using the chat heavily. I think I have been thinking more than ever before about what sort of things do I want people to put in the chat versus what sort of things do I want people to talk about in small groups versus in a large group setting. So please, we have a whole tool belt to use. Please use all of them, essentially. Like that is how we keep things fun and engaging, and we're not just looking at Brady Bunch squares and working through an agenda. And then think about how you can use pre-work whenever possible to shorten the length of the meeting. So we'll talk about Zoom fatigue in just a second. But how can you give people some of the tasky things to do before your meeting so that your in-person time can be used on conversation, can be used on connection and engagement? One tip that I always give to any student organization is, can you send out meeting minutes ahead of time that have all the links, announcements, etc.? And then at the beginning of your meeting, just say, are there any questions about the minutes? So do that and then use that time for something that is meaningful and engaging. So that both allows you to free up time to do some of these things that we're talking about today, as well as shorten the meeting, which is just something we have to do right now as everyone is burning out on Zoom. And I'm only modeling this so well right now, but there is this concept that we talk about in leadership education, also education generally, about this notion of the sage on the stage, which is essentially you think about the professor who is standing up at the stage, just sharing all of their brilliant information. That's a really boring way for people to be engaged with things. And people do student organizations because they want to have fun and they want to talk to their friends. So as much as possible, and I think particularly this is my charge for our presidents in the group, how can you make sure that you are sharing the time, that we're focusing more on dialogue and conversation and less on report out and sharing out in that way? We can talk a whole bunch more about ways you might avoid that, but that is just something to have in the back of your head. How are you making sure that lots of people's voices are important and lots of people's knowledge is privileged in every meeting that you're having? Okay, some more in the weeds tips and tricks. Don't screen share the whole time if at all possible. So we are going to breakout rooms a whole bunch. If we weren't going to breakout rooms, anytime that we were jumping into these sort of activities that we just modeled, I would have dropped out of the screen share because you need to look at each other's faces, not look at the PowerPoint that told you to look at each other's faces. So ever possible. And whenever we get to our group discussion a little bit later, I will drop us out of the screen share so that you can see each other's faces or boxes with your names on it, whatever that looks like, as much as possible. We talked about this already, but if you do screen share, please make sure to share your computer sound if you're trying to do anything with sound. And be really careful with Spotify specifically. For some reason, the volume on Spotify is significantly magnified when you screen share it using Zoom as a platform. So I have my volume down at like 15% to the point where I almost can't hear it, and it still sounds very loud for people on the other end. So don't blast out people's ears if you're trying to just have some fun jams going on in the background at the beginning of your meeting. That's one of those like learned it from doing it wrong things. Think about how you can use display names or digital backgrounds to help build your team. So do you give everyone a different challenge of finding a different digital background every week? Do you change display names to include a favorite character or something like that? How can you leverage every single piece of media that's in front of you to let people talk a little bit more about themselves or have other fun facts? This, again, is one of those learn it from doing it wrong things. If someone is presenting, see if someone else can be monitoring the chat. It is sometimes really hard, especially if you're trying to deliver information, to also be watching the chat simultaneously. So if you know you want to be leveraging that chat because it's a way to get people up and engaged, maybe tap in another officer in your organization, share the responsibilities there, but can you have one person who's on chat duty while someone else is on sharing duty? And then this is, again, one of those, it feels low level, but it really needs to be decided on things. Decide how you'll be calling on people. So are you going to popcorn it? Like someone's going to speak up and then they're going to call on the next person. Is the person who is leading the meeting going to call on people by name? Are you going to use the raised hands feature in Zoom? Are you going to physically raise your hands and in the camera? We keep laughing on our staff right now. I've never done so many thumbs up or like waves in my life, in my adult life, as I have in the last 4 months. Something else that I've seen is once you're ready to answer, put your name in the chat and then we will go through it that way. So that way we don't have to keep our hands raised or something like that. So that's another method of how you're gonna be calling on people. But please don't just leave it up to chance. Make sure that you have a way that you are calling on people. And then this is my big discovery of the last month that I'm just trying to share with everyone as possible. I personally get really distracted, as I mentioned earlier, seeing myself. In both Zoom and Skype, you can turn off your self view. So on Zoom, you would hover above your picture and those 3 dots pop up in the right corner and you can say mute self view and it will drop the video of your own face out of your view, but everyone else will still be able to see you. I try to leave my video on as much as possible in meetings because I know that I am really missing nonverbal cues from people and also just my colleagues and friends' faces. But I'm tired of seeing my own face. So I hide my self view just about all the time. In Skype, you can just minimize it. Google Hangout, unfortunately, does not allow this right now, but they, I think, are working on an update that allows it. But if that is something that is exciting for you, please let me just share the wealth of knowledge there that you can turn off your self view. It's great. Okay, let's, oh my God. Let's talk about Zoom fatigue, y'all. This is a phrase that I don't think I had ever heard before March, and I now hear it 17 times a day. But it is this concept of how our brains and bodies and souls are genuinely just more tired being on all of these digital conversations on a regular basis. There's a lot of reason to the science behind it. Part of it is that there's a 1.2 second delay between what you say and when people hear you say it. And that 1.2 second delay to our brains says this person is less interested in what I'm saying. But Zoom meetings tire us out in a way that other things do not. A lot of our students and students who are on this call, y'all, are also going to be in virtual classroom spaces in addition to in-person and physically distant classroom spaces. So we are not even the first Zoom meeting they're having that day by the time they get to their student organization meeting. So it is important to remember some of those things that we already talked about. You're going to want to plan ahead. How can you use pre-work in a meaningful way? And your meetings will have to be shorter. Like they just genuinely will be, or maybe less frequent. So think about how are you not maxing people out as best as possible. But you will definitely need to make sure that you are planning ahead. And also not be afraid to advocate for yourself. If you are a student leader, you can also say like, hey y'all, I'm tired at this point. Like, I don't know if I can engage in this meeting fully. Could we maybe reschedule it for a day where I have a few less meetings on the calendar? It's okay to ask for that as well. But how are we planning really intentionally to not burn people out quite as much? Okay. So we were gonna do a third activity here. I'm gonna explain it, but not actually do it, in part because I want us to get into the next discussion. I feel like that is gonna be more helpful for people. So the reason that I did not have you report out your vacation location earlier is we were going to practice a consensus building activity. So a way for people to do some group brainstorming and discussion in a way that isn't just everyone answer this poll question. So what you were going to do is be sent to mixed up breakout rooms from where you were earlier, and you were going to have to advocate for why your vacation location was definitely the best decision. And then we were going to do that twice through. So send you to one round of breakout rooms of advocacy and a second round. And then we were going to poll the group to see which vacation location was our successful winner here. So this is a way to do consensus building and discussion in a way that does more connection and engagement. I also like to try different ways to build consensus, because if we're just in a large group advocating for our things, the loudest, largest, most obnoxious voice, I am that person in a lot of meetings, is normally going to get their voice heard. And so how can we use small groups and breakout groups to make sure lots of voices are heard? So I should have mentioned this at the beginning, I'm currently working on a guide of virtual activities that we can be doing. It is not complete yet, so I'd love to say it was available today, but it'll be available in a couple of weeks. That activity, along with everything else that we're doing, will be in there. And so if I did not explain that fully and thoroughly for you all, you'll be able to see that in the guide, and we can talk more about it later. But I hope that no one is devastated that we're not going to do that activity and we're going to have a different discussion instead, because I want to be mindful of our time together. Okay. So I'm going to give you all a couple of minutes in your breakout spaces. I want you to reflect on virtual experiences that you have been participating in for the last couple of months. And even before then, if you were doing virtual things, for good sessions, what did you like? Like, what was good about it? And be really specific, right? Like, was it that we were having a good discussion? Was it the way it was facilitated? Was it who was on the call? How many people were on the call, et cetera? And for less good sessions, what annoyed you about it? What mistakes do you keep seeing people repeating? So I'm going to give you just a few minutes in your breakout rooms, and then we will come back together to process that as well. Hi, friends. Welcome back. I know that's not nearly enough time, but I want to be cognizant of our time together. So I would love to hear a little bit of large group report out here. What are some things that have worked for people that they really liked? And what are some things that have been super annoying? And for the sake of our purposes, if you can unmute if you are ready to share something, and then I will call on you by name. Kidron.
Hey, one of the things that I brought up was the importance of some sort of itinerary. I echoed, that I really like to sort of wing things to and try to produce like organic conversation. And I feel like that's just a little bit harder in Zoom. You're lacking that actual face-to-face. It's more face to computer to face. So I think that the meetings that I've, been in charge of, it's really important to have some sort of talking point list. Anything will help the structure of a meeting in Zoom. Without that structure, I just feel like Zoom either goes on for 2 hours or the meeting just isn't as productive as it could be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing. Other things that people chatted about. Penny, hi.
Hi, I was like, should I raise my hand physically or do I raise hand?
No, you're good. I'm like scanning, I'm scanning the squares furiously.
No, you're good. So one of the things that SAC added to the end of their virtual meetings, because they did their weekly meetings virtuals after spring break, was they would select students to give a tour of their childhood bedroom or their home or their family, because a lot of them had been already returned home. So it was a way for them to show something that was really personal, but not something that they experienced on campus. So it was like, hey, this is my poster for that I put up when I was in 8th grade, things like that. One thing too that I've been really trying to push with SAC is the importance of closed captioning. In the Alumni Association, it's standard that we provide closed captioning unless, you know, every single person does not need that support. So with info sessions and recruitment and all that, I'm trying to get them to think about those accommodations early.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And to the closed captioning point too, some things that are available in Zoom, you can assign someone to caption or use a third party. The newest versions of Google Slides and PowerPoints also do a live closed captioning. So if you're sharing over one of those formats, it's important to note that both that and the captions that Zoom does, because if you record to the cloud on Zoom, it will also live caption it for the recording. Are not ADA approved, but they are captions. So just an important thing to note there as well, but that those are all captioning options. So thank you for sharing that as well. Yeah. What else, y'all? What else did we talk about? Anything that people have just been really frustrated by that we can sort of collectively groan on and agree not to do? Yeah, Allison.
Our group kind of talked about the pitfalls and the benefits of having like a webinar style. It can either be like really well done if you keep everyone's statements like short and sweet, or sometimes it can drag on and like you're just hearing the same couple of people talk throughout the thing, and it doesn't really promote engagement. One way that my research center has gotten around that with we've been doing webinar flash talks, is they have the Zoom webinar style for the talks, and then everyone can ask questions like in the chat or by raising a hand, and then we close that meeting and open up like a Zoom meeting like this where we can all see each other. But if we didn't have that, it would definitely be more of a drag.
Yeah, that's fair. Something else that I've seen too in webinar style is people having concurrent Google Docs. Obviously we wouldn't do Google Docs in Ohio State, but concurrent Google Docs of prompts of ways for people to live chat and react with each other during a webinar that have different topics, and they drop the links to those in the chat. So that's another thing I've seen in specific like webinar engagement tools. But I think we have similarly struggled with the webinar is the best format to deliver the information in the way we need to, and also it feels even more impersonal than looking at the Brady Bunch squares of a Zoom meeting room. Okay. Anything else that people want to talk about from your small group brainstorms about things that are going well or not so well? Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the share for just a second and make sure that we offer up some resources from our student org team here. So these are, Brooke, I don't know if you want to share this out or if you'd like me to talk through it.
I definitely can. So just a few things here that we can do to continue to just have these conversations, stay connected. So for one, I am currently hosting office hours weekly. Now until basically through the end of July, I'm doing it on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. And then from then on, closer to the school year, when we're in the registration window, I'll be having them twice a week. But the links to the Zoom links and the details about that are on our Student Org homepage, which is the Go link there on the screen for that. And then the second item there was Student Org Success Coaches, and this is a resource for an organization during the school year. Coaches are trained peer leaders who talk about student org stuff, member development, org operations, community engagement, kind of all of those main pillars of what organizations focus on. And it's really nice to have that peer-to-peer connection and relationship that can be ongoing throughout the year. So check out the coach request form if you'd like to have some conversations with our coaches. And then the last thing was just a shameless plug for the rest of this series. We only have one more for the summer, which is on July 23rd in 2 weeks, all about sort of recruitment in our virtual space and what that looks like. And then we will be continuing our Student Org Essentials series in the fall and the spring this coming school year. So that Go link where it's go.osu.edu/StudentOrgPrograms, that's where you'll have the opportunity to access the recordings for these series, share any ideas that you have about other options that you'd like to see or topics that you'd like to see. There's a link for that on that page as well. And our future postings will go up there as well. And as always, you can email us at any time at csls@osu.edu if you just want to start a conversation informally.
Sweet, thanks. Wanted to make sure that we got into those. So y'all, the closing thought I want to have here, and then because it's new, or because it is one, I want to be mindful of that, but I'm going to hang on the call. So if you do have questions you want to chat through, I will stay and we can keep chatting about it. But closing thought, practice makes perfect on this. Figure out what works, try things, like don't be afraid to throw spaghetti against a wall and see what sticks. But keep practicing as best as you can. And then that is my contact information. So you can find me at wagner.1476 if you want to chat about anything. I am going to drop out of the screen share at this point, but whoever, if you have questions, why don't you go ahead and submit them in the chat and we can keep chatting as long as Brooke is fine for this room to stay open.